They called it the perfect suburban facade. A neat red brick on Cardinal Road, Glenroy, 15 kilometers north of Melbourne city bustle. In the late 1960s, neighbors saw the Crawfords as textbook Australian respectability. Elmer, the quiet Sparky from Victoria Racing Club, his wife Therese, a smiling nursing sister, and 3 cheerful children, Catherine, 13, James, 8, and little Karen, 6, racing bikes along the nature strip. Yet behind the closed curtains of number 14 brewed an unease so thick it crackled like faulty wiring. No one imagined that unease would culminate in one of Australia's most chilling mysteries. A family annihilation, a staged car crash at a windswept cliff, and a patriarch who slipped through history's fingers. Elmer Kyle Crawford was born in 1930 near Killucan, County Westmeath, Ireland. Post-war scarcity taught him thrift and secrecy. At 19, he migrated to Melbourne with the 10-pound palm influx, carrying electrician skills and a chronic distrust of bureaucracy. Friends described him as handy but distant, happiest rewiring appliances in the shed with only a shortwave radio for company. He met Therese, an outgoing trainee nurse from Coburg, at a parish dance in 1957. Opposites attracted. Her laughter-filled rooms, his silence anchored them. They married within 18 months, honeymooned at Lake's entrance, and soon welcomed Catherine. By 1969, Elmer held a coveted post maintaining electrical systems at the Victoria Racing Club's Flemington track. The job came with modest prestige and occasional race day perks. But mechanic workshops whispered he pocketed discarded copper wire for resale, inflating family savings without Therese's knowledge. Therese, meanwhile, managed the home on Cardinal Road, charity drives at St. Aloysius, school tuck shop rosters, and evening shifts at a children's hospital. Their differing temperaments formed hairline cracks. Therese urged renovations and vacations. Elmer hoarded overtime and preached austerity. Tension escalated when Therese fell pregnant again in early 1969. At 35, she worried about complications. Elmer fretted over stretched finances. Her obstetrician prescribed barbiturates against anxiety, leaving orange bottles in the kitchen cabinet. Neighbors recall raised voices, Therese pleading to replace a failing fridge, Elmer insisting, no more spending, we need buffer. Underneath lay a deeper friction, Therese's whisper to a confidant that she might change her will. She allegedly planned to leave part of a modest inheritance to her sister should anything happen, fearing Elmer's tight-fisted ways. Whether Elmer discovered this fear remains speculation, but police later surmised he rifled her paperwork. Autumn 1970 arrived with gray skies and racing season. Elmer worked overtime at Flemington, repairing transformer boxes near the birdcage enclosure. He quietly borrowed a portable heat kit multimeter and heavy drop cords, returning neither. Around the same time, he signed out a roll of electrical tape and a pair of alligator clips, items mundane on a maintenance log, yet sinister in hindsight. At home, he tinkered after midnight in the shed, soldering something he refused to explain. Therese attributed it to his usual penny-pinching projects. The children found excuses to avoid the acrid smoke. On the last weekend of June, Therese visited her parish priest, Father Donovan, for confession. Her voice, normally lilting, sounded flat. She reportedly asked about annulment grounds, citing irreconcilable thrift and unspecified unkind acts. Canon law offered little solace. She left still troubled. That evening, Elmer mowed the lawn, eyes tracking airline routes overhead, as if plotting distances. Catherine babysat her siblings, indoors, unaware their father's mind may have already crossed an ocean. Midweek, Elmer cashed out £432, nearly all the family's savings from a Bank of New South Wales branch in Ascot Vale. He told the teller he intended a car upgrade. Instead, he bought a second-hand red VB Commodore battery at a scrapyard, paying in notes instead of his usual coins. That battery, police believe, replaced the Holden's original unit so he could repurpose wiring unnoticed. He also purchased a rubber garden hose and 4 brass T-pieces from a North Melbourne hardware shop, items filed on no invoice because he insisted on cash, declining a receipt. Therese's final appearance in Glenroy folklore came on Monday, 29 June. She collected Karen from prep class, waved to Mrs. Taylor next door, and mentioned Elmer planned a surprise road trip to the coast after payday. Mrs. Taylor teased, "You'll freeze at Port Fairy this time of year," but Therese smiled. Elmer says fresh air is cheaper than cinema tickets. Nobody saw her alive again. Investigators reconstructed the next 48 hours from forensic traces and grim speculation. Late Tuesday night, while children slept in bunks, Elmer lugged the Commodore battery into the master bedroom. He had crafted a lethal rig, leads connecting the battery to copper clips, copper attached to insulated bulldog clamps. He gently lifted Teresa's bedside lamp, wound the active lead to its metal base, and placed the neutral clamp against a pre-soaked barbiturate capsule taped to her thigh. When he flicked the current, it triggered ventricular fibrillation, an induced heart attack leaving minimal external trauma. She died silently. Catherine likely woke. Evidence suggested she walked down the hallway, her footprints in sawdust Elmer used to mask noise. He employed the same horrific method on his eldest, then moved to the children's room. James's small knuckles bore defensive bruises. Karen's bedsheets were soaked where she may have vomited the sedatives mixed into milk earlier. Midnight became a theater of electricity and betrayal, each jolt ending a life Elmer had sworn to protect. Come dawn, Glenroy stirred. Milk bars opened, trams clanged, the Crawford house curtains stayed drawn. Elmer methodically wrapped each body in electric blankets, secured with extension cords. He hoisted them into the family's gray 1956 Holden FE sedan, Therese in the boot, children on the rear floor. A neighbor glimpsed him packing camping gear and thought nothing odd. Folks set out early to beat Great Ocean Road traffic. At 10 a.m., Elmer withdrew another 30 pounds cash for petrol and sandwiches along the Prince's Highway. The journey to Port Campbell National Park spans 230 kilometers of rolling dairy country and cliff edge vistas. Elmer drove in drizzle, wipers pacing like metronomes. Bundles in his car remained unseen, bodies concealed under a grubby tarp. He passed Colac, turned south at Timboon, and reached Loch Ard Gorge by dusk, tourists long departed. There, coastal winds roar through limestone canyons, and the sea foams like a mouth of broken teeth. Perfect stage for an accident. Elmer parked near the cliff railing, rigged the Holden's accelerator with copper wire to the steering column, running engine at idle. He placed a garden hose from exhaust into the rear window, sealing gaps with tape. Carbon monoxide filled the cabin, not that the passengers breathed. At 11 p.m., tide rising, he released the handbrake. Gravity nudged 1.5 tons of metal toward the abyss. The Holden bounced once on rocky ledge before cartwheeling into the gorge floor, splashing into swells. Elmer watched from shadows. Evidence suggests he shoved the car over but stayed ashore, carrying a suitcase and an envelope of cash. Morning light on 2nd July 1970 illuminated the wreck for passing tourists, bodies wedged grotesquely, electric leads still clipped to skin. Victoria police soon cordoned the site. Newspapers blared "Family's Cliff Horror." Investigators traced the car to Glenroy. Inside the empty house, they found Elmer's muddy boots missing, wardrobe half empty, and his toolbox stripped of wiring. He had vanished, a ghost born on thrift and calculation. Morning fog blanketed Port Campbell as investigators hauled the Crawford Holden from Loch Ard Gorge. Constable Peter Franklin, first on scene, had never seen a crash like it. Sedan nose down on limestone boulders, boot lid caved, 3 small bodies contorted on the backseat floor, Therese wedged in the trunk, her skin oddly pale yet unmarked by blunt force. Even before forensics arrived, Franklin sensed uglier truth than a cliff edge mishap. The ignition was off, keys missing, and a garden hose protruded from the rear window. When pathologists found copper bite marks on the victim's thighs, burn circles that matched gator clip edges, Victoria police pivoted from accident protocol to homicide. Detective Sergeant Ian Tomlinson took command. Within hours, Glenroy's Cardinal Road thrummed with uniforms, tape, and cameras. Inside the modest brick home, detectives cataloged anomalies: extension cords missing prongs, sawdust sprinkled along hallway skirting, barbiturate bottles half empty, and Elmer's toolbox stripped of crocodile clips and heavy leads. A single suitcase, Elmer's, was gone, wardrobe drawers half emptied, while Teresa's clothes remained neatly folded. No passport lay in bedroom drawers.
but Teresa's and the children's passports sat untouched in a hallway bureau. Tomlinson concluded Elmer staged a mass electrocution, then carbon monoxide misdirection, and pushed the Holden off the cliff, hoping sea currents would sweep incriminating proof away. He underestimated limestone ledges and low tide. A statewide alert flashed across telex machines. Wanted, Elmer Kyle Crawford, homicide X4. Description: 40 years, 5'6", medium build, receding brown hair, Irish accent softened by decades in Melbourne. Distinguishing features: mallet finger deformity left hand, small scar over right eyebrow. Officers canvassed train depots, airports, caravan parks, but July 1970 offered no CCTV, no instant databases. Crawford enjoyed precious head start, likely 36 hours before bodies were found.
The manhunt began with logical steps: border crossings. Immigration records showed no departure under Elmer's name, but Tomlinson considered aliases. Crawford was a skilled tinkerer who loathed bureaucracy. Forging papers fit his profile. Police found evidence he'd purchased a rubber stamp kit and blank ID slips from a surplus shop months earlier. Customs officers scanned passenger lists for similar ages heading to Ireland, UK, or USA. Nothing concrete surfaced. Public fascination exploded. The Herald Sun splashed, "Family wiped out, father vanishes." Radio talkbacks speculated motives: insurance, jealousy, mental snap. 2 weeks in, leads poured. Elmer hitchhiking near Geelong. Elmer sleeping rough outside Adelaide. Elmer preaching scripture in Ballarat. All false, though one Adelaide sighting of a man with mallet finger lingered. Shopkeeper swore accent was soft Irish. Police arrived 3 days late. Phantom gone. Interpol circulated green notices by August. Royal Ulster Constabulary checked Killucan, no sign. Rumor claimed a cousin received a cryptic postcard, blank apart from seaside stamp and the words "back on the green" in Gaelic, but the cousin denied it publicly. Tomlinson's team followed finances. Bank of New South Wales traced Crawford's last withdrawal of £432. Subsequent branch visits across Victoria reported no activity on his account. A deeper dive revealed he'd opened a second account in March under Edward Kyle, depositing scrap copper cash. That account emptied the morning of 1st July, £621 gone. Police theorized he carried nearly £1,100, ample to vanish in 1970. A breakthrough emerged mid-August. An electrician in Mount Isa, Queensland, reported hiring a taciturn Irishman named Ross for a cash job rewiring a feedlot. The man slept in his panel van, paid everything in crisp Victorian notes, and vanished after payday, leaving behind a burned multimeter-etched VRC property stamp. Investigators flew north. The trail cooled at Barclay Highway, where a roadhouse clerk recalled fueling a beige E.H. Holden panel van driven by Ross, heading toward NT border. Vehicle registration unknown, plates missing. Northern Territory police combed roadhouses along the Stewart Highway but found no firm sightings. Aboriginal trackers scanned scrublands for abandoned vehicles. Nothing surfaced. Weeks turned into months, and headlines moved on. Yet Tomlinson refused closure. He filed Crawford among Australia's top 10 fugitives, antenna always up. In October 1971, a bizarre cable arrived from Honolulu PD. A man matching Elmer's description collapsed outside a Waikiki hostel, broke his wrist. Hospital staff photographed the injury. Doctor noted mallet finger on opposite hand. The patient gave name John Allen, then disappeared after X-ray. Passport details were vague, suspected forged UK document. Australian consulate requested prints, but hostel bedsheets had been laundered, and X-ray clerks discarded admission card. Another ghost. Through the 1970s, Crawford became myth. Campfire tales claimed he worked cabins along New Zealand's Milford Track. Prospectors swore he sold opals at Coober Pedy. Conspiracy buffs alleged he sneaked into Northern Ireland to fund IRA cousins. Tomlinson sifted each claim. Most collapsed under scrutiny. Yet pattern revealed a chameleon relying on cash jobs, remote locations, minimal contact. By 1980, Tomlinson retired, passing files to Detective Senior Constable Ron Iddles, future legend of Victoria Police. Iddles re-examined forensic gaps,
particularly the improvised electrocution device. He consulted pathologists, confirming copper clip marks inconsistent with common suicide gadgets. Crawford had engineered a silent, telltale-free kill method, showing premeditation of unsettling sophistication. Iddles traveled to Ireland. No trace at ancestral farm. Parish records hinted a cousin received £200 via postal order around 1974, signed EKC. The timeline implied Crawford survived at least 4 years abroad. In 1994, U.S. Marshals contacted Victoria Police regarding an unidentified body found near San Angelo, Texas in '85. Dental charts bore similarity to Crawford's, and the man carried Irish ID for a John Vincent Donahue. Australian detectives flew to Texas. Dental comparison failed. DNA tech nascent then couldn't clinch identity. Texas John Doe re-entered cold case vaults. The next near miss occurred 1998. Canadian RCMP arrested an illegal drifter in British Columbia for copper wire theft. Prints sent via I-24/7 network flagged partial match to Elmer's childhood prints, inked for a 1949 Irish electrician's license. But full match inconclusive. Drifter hanged himself in cell before confirmation. With no family DNA on file, all Crawford's dead, the case stalled. Iddles petitioned to exhume Theresa's sister for mitochondrial DNA. Family refused. As 2000s dawned, internet sleuths revived interest. Online forums dissected kill method, speculated Crawford's skill set suited oil rig electrical work, a booming field where ID checks lax. One theory posted 2003 suggested he'd boarded merchant ships in Darwin, eventually reaching Southeast Asia. No manifest proved it, yet oil rig HR managers worldwide received Crawford bulletins.
In 2008, authorities thought they'd finally cornered him. A bedridden stroke patient in a San Diego hospice answered to Ronald Kerrigan, age 77, Irish accent. A visiting nurse saw a faded scar above his right brow and a mallet finger. She Googled Irish mallet finger family killer and hid Crawford. USDHS alerted Australia. Fingerprints rolled. Shockingly, prints matched the partial from Irish license and VRC employment card. Media frenzy erupted. But as extradition paperwork readied, dental records diverged. Further DNA from distant relatives of Kerrigan in Dublin proved he was Basil Malone, petty criminal, unrelated. False victory stung morale. By 2010, Detective Iddles, older, appeared on 60 Minutes, pleading public help. He highlighted Crawford's possible appearance: aged skin, stooped, Irish lilt, likely reclusive electrician with cash-only habits. Tip lines buzzed again, nothing solid. Victoria Police kept Crawford's warrant alive. Technically, he'd be 80. Some speculated he died in desert heat. Others pictured him tending bar on Spanish Costa del Sol under EU amnesty. Criminologists debated psychology. Was his motive pure financial control? Fear of divorce leaving him destitute? Did he regret? A 2012 psychiatric profile suggested sociopathic traits with meticulous planning, low empathy. In 2018, genealogical DNA services boomed. Cold case detectives convinced distant Crawford cousins in Ireland to upload profiles. They hoped a stray relative of Elmer, or even Elmer under an alias, might surface. No hits yet, but the database grows yearly. As of 2025, Elmer Kyle Crawford remains wanted. Case open, reward $100,000 AUD. Police renew pleas on anniversaries, brandishing age-progressed sketches, gaunt cheeks, silver hair, thick-framed spectacles. By the mid-2000s, the Crawford file had swollen into 4 archive boxes: yellowing witness statements, photo prints of copper clips, grainy cliff-face panoramas. Detective Senior Sergeant Ron Iddles dubbed it the case that ages with me. But as forensic technology galloped ahead, hope rekindled that science could illuminate what traditional policing had not. In 2007, Victoria Police launched the Cold Case Homicide Squad. Elmer Crawford's dossier was among its first digital conversions. Scanned documents fed into a searchable database, letting algorithms cross-reference names, bank accounts, and flight manifests once trapped on microfiche. The earliest breakthrough came from unexpected quarters: vehicle dynamic simulation software. Engineers at Monash University's Accident Research Center volunteered to reconstruct Crawford's Holden FE plunge. Using laser-scanned terrain maps of Loch Ard Gorge and period-accurate car mass data, they built a 3D model that mapped every bounce, crumple, and splash.
The program suggested the car did not roll accidentally, but was given a deliberate shove equivalent to a 4 km/h push. More telling, it showed the hose arrangement would have dislodged during the initial cliff impact unless taped exactly the way detectives found. Evidence of staged theatrics, strengthening homicide briefs if Crawford was ever captured. Next came reanalysis of biological evidence. The 1970 autopsies retained tissue slides preserved in paraffin blocks. Advances in mitochondrial DNA extraction now allowed partial profiles despite degradation. Scientists at the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine retrieved return-line mtDNA from Therese and her children. The profiles entered Australia's national DNA database, establishing a reference that future familial searches could ping against. Crucially, because Crawford shared no maternal line with his victims, any later sample tied to him would stand out rather than blend. Parallel to lab work, digital sleuths dissected the electrocution apparatus. A retired CSIR physicist, drawn by an online true crime forum, built a replica with identical 1960s components sourced from swap meets. He demonstrated on a beef joint that Crawford's setup could induce fatal ventricular fibrillation in under 5 seconds using a 12-volt battery. Quiet, mark-sparse, and portable. The demonstration, filmed and supplied to detectives, dispelled lingering theories that the burns were from accidental contact with faulty wiring. It cemented premeditation in the public mind, prompting renewed media coverage. Publicity spurred a pivotal 2011 phone tip from Western Australia. An 82-year-old retired station cook near Kalgoorlie claimed a gray-bearded Irishman called Old Kyle worked as an itinerant fencer on remote cattle runs in the late 70s. Kyle fixed diesel generators with uncanny skill, refused bank payments, and spoke of putting the past to sleep. Police combed employment ledgers of pastoral leases. They found payslip signed K. Ross, matching Crawford's known alias from Mount Isa. Yet tracing stopped cold. Kyle left after a year, destination unknown. Shortly after, the cold case team adopted an emergent tool, facial age progression, using craniofacial superimposition. Artists merged Crawford's 1969 ID photo with 3D anatomical averages for Irish males aging into their 70s. The result? A gaunt face, sun-creased, with drooping lower eyelids and sparse silver hair combed over.
Media plastered the image across evening bulletins titled, "Have you seen this man?" Hundreds of leads surfaced, bush hermits, quiet caravan park residents, overseas vagrants, but none panned out. Frustration bred creativity. Forensic accountants dug deeper into copper scrap sales from the late 60s. They discovered invoices under C Electrics at a Footscray yard, paid in cash. A marginal note read, "Delivery, Kyle." Another invoice from 1973, 3 years post-murders, appeared at a Perth yard under C Electrics, identical handwriting. Investigators mapped a transcontinental path. Crawford likely crawled west across the continent, swapping short-term electrical gigs for freight rides until he reached boomtown Perth, where cash-in-hand labor abounded amid mining expansion. Inside Perth's archive, detectives located a union application card for a K. Ross, electrician, dated 1974. Thumbprint inked on corner bore 9 matching minutiae to Crawford's 1962 immigration card. The print quality, however, fell below court certainty. Still, the card's address, an East Fremantle boarding house, supplied new witness possibilities. Door knocks found the long-retired landlady, now in a nursing home. She remembered a secretive Irish tenant who slept with a suitcase in his bedframe and left suddenly after a police patrol visited the neighborhood. The timeline matched a 1975 murder warrant circular that blanketed WA pubs. In 2015, the National DNA Program for Unidentified Human Remains funded exhumations of several John Does buried in outback cemeteries. One, interred as unknown male 1980 near Norseman, drew detective attention. Estimated age 50, mallet deformity on left index. Exhumation yielded a full mtDNA profile. Comparison to Crawford's paternal relatives, located via Irish parish registers and modern genealogical kits, gave a 1 in 10,000 likelihood of kinship. Significant but inconclusive without nuclear DNA. Unfortunately, epithelial cells were too degraded for autosomal confirmation. The corpse remained a maybe, the mystery unsolved. That same year, Australian Federal Police adopted the FBI's next-generation facial recognition system. Crawford's aged composite entered as test. The system spat out a potential match to a 2012 U.S. mugshot in Fresno, California. Arrest for petty copper theft.
The arrestee, John Coyle, had died of pneumonia in custody before fingerprinting. His body cremated, no prints, no DNA stored. Surveillance footage, however, revealed only partial face. Analysts considered resemblance moderate. Once again, smoke without fire. In 2019, underwater technology revisited Loch Ard Gorge. Marine archaeologists deploying photogrammetry drones sought shipwreck relics, but stumbled upon new angles of the Crawford Holden debris still wedged in a surge channel. High-resolution scans found scratch marks on undercarriage, suggesting secondary impact pre-plunge. Consistent with detectives' belief, Crawford manually steered the car to cliff edge, then used a levered timber beam discovered nearby to tip it. The beam's end bore Crawford's axe handle prints, latent but present thanks to mineral leaching. A modern reagent teased enough ridge detail for digital storage, offering fresh biometric reference for future unknowns. During pandemic lockdowns, armchair detectives reignited interest. One user built machine learning models scraping obituary databases worldwide for Irish immigrants with mallet finger injuries and electrical trades. Model flagged a 2005 death notice in Winnipeg for a Kelvin Cross, bachelor, retired electrician, survived by distant cousin in Ireland. Canadian authorities provided fingerprints from his citizenship file. Alas, they matched no known sample. But dental charts intriguingly displayed a bridge identical to one Crawford's dentist fitted in 1968. Without original molds, certainty remained elusive, yet suspicion grew Crawford might have died quietly abroad. By 2024, hopes pivoted to universal familial DNA. Victoria Police uploaded Crawford's niece's autosomal profiles into international law enforcement-only database. Hits trickled, a second cousin in South Africa, a grandnephew in Boston, but none close enough to link unknown remains. Detectives wait, aware each new genealogical upload grows the statistical net. One day, an adopted grandchild might test and anchor Crawford's lineage. Meanwhile, criminologists reassessed motive. Newly declassified coronial documents showed Therese consulted a solicitor weeks before her death. Draft wills favored children over spouse, contradicting Elmer's thrifty aims. Insurance investigators noted Crawford attempted to claim a double indemnity on the policy by citing accidental carbon monoxide deaths, but paperwork never lodged because he vanished. The narrative hardened, financial gain laced with control paranoia, executed with engineers' cold precision. Newsreels fade, detectives retire, but certain crimes burrow so deep they germinate folklore. By the 1990s, Elmer Crawford had joined Ned Kelly and the Somerton Man in Australia's pantheon of enigmatic villains. Except Crawford's evil felt more intimate. Parents in Glenroy invoked his name to nudge kids indoors at dusk. Mind yourself or Elmer'll get you. True crime paperbacks printed shadowy covers. A cliff, a Holden, a silhouette with an electrician's pliers. Yet myths seed leads. As public curiosity bloomed, investigators learned to sift exaggeration from possibility, harvesting slim facts from tall tales. One constant myth portrayed Crawford as a master of disguise. Popular television special, Australia's Most Elusive, dramatized him shaving eyebrows, filing fingerprints with sandpaper, practicing new accents by reading race results aloud. The show triggered a spike in tips, mostly fanciful, but one stood out. A retired railguard recalled a 1976 overland service where a nervous Irish passenger obsessed over connection times to Broken Hill, claiming he'd lost his ID in a robbery. The guard remembered malformed left index and right brow scar. Passenger detrained at Dimboola before police boarding at Horsham. Investigators cross-checked rosters. Indeed, a Kyle Ross bought cash ticket that night. The timeline dovetailed with the East Frantal boarding house stint, suggesting Crawford's flight path zigzagged regional rails, hopping off whenever uniforms appeared. Meanwhile, forensic psychology matured. In 2002, Monash University's Dr. Helen Parenti compiled the first family annihilators typology in Australia. Crawford exemplified the paranoid controller, financially anxious, taciturn, able to mask emotions while orchestrating elaborate murder to avoid perceived humiliation. Crucially, Parenti argued such killers often survive post-crime, driven not by impulse but by strategic planning. Her journal article reignited police funding, framing Crawford as capture-worthy, not buried in desert sands. With fresh grants, Victoria Police sought digital police help from corporations. Telstra provided historical subscriber data dumps.
Algorithms searched for clusters of post-1970 phone services opened by Irish males born 1930 using paper IDs. 3 false matches popped, one in Alice Springs, one in Bustleton, one in Burnie, none stuck. Yet, the Bustleton applicant used the address of a holiday shack near Geographa Bay. Detectives canvassed local archives. 1982 council permits listed K. Ross wiring upgrade. Aerial photos placed an unregistered caravan on site through mid-80s. By 87, it vanished. Another breadcrumb, gone with the tide. In 2005, genealogist Claire Ford started tracing the Crawford Trail blog. She mapped shipping manifests from Darwin in the early 70s, when ID checks were lax. She discovered coastal freighter MV Devonia sailed Bali-Darwin-Geraldton routes, crewed partly by cash-hire deckhands. An archived roster dated December 1971 listed E. Craw, no final letters, hired as electrical wiper. Maritime Union confirmed the ledger's authenticity. If Crawford boarded the Devonia, he could have disembarked anywhere in the archipelago, melting into expatriate electrician circles feeding Indonesia's oil boom. Australian Federal Police liaison with Indonesian Polri reviewed immigration stubs. Manual ledgers faded. An entry for Edwin Crow matched Irish birth year, arrival Kupang 1972, purpose labor. No exit recorded. That lead died when archives drowned in mildew. Yet the hypothesis morphed. Crawford possibly entrenched himself on Kalimantan rigs, where passports surrendered to contractors and safety goggles hid aging faces. Simultaneously, pop culture shaped memory. A 2009 indie film, Cardinal Road, fictionalized events, casting Crawford as charismatic anti-hero. Critics decried romanticizing a child killer. Nevertheless, box office buzz again flooded tip lines. Among the noise emerged a credible whisper. A Darwin motel owner saw the film and recognized the antagonist as Quiet Kyle, a handyman tenant round Easter 1972. He recalled Kyle explained mallet finger as circular saw mishap and left behind a dog-eared electrics for boats manual. Detectives found decades-old motel receipts with scrawled surname K. Crow. Another near hit, another wisp. Technology's next leap, familial DNA phenotyping, arrived 2017. Forensic labs could infer eye color, hair texture, and even regional ancestry from partial samples. Scientists revisited the ridge marks collected from the timber beam used to lever the Holden. Between mineral deposits, they lifted trace sweat peptides. Proteomic inference suggested the secretor had AB-positive blood type, matching Crawford's immigration medical. Still circumstantial, but each puzzle piece sharpened silhouette. With every anniversary, journalists sought angles. They interviewed schoolmates of Catherine, James, Karen, now gray-haired themselves. One classmate revealed Catherine kept a diary. Maybe it survived? Police researched evidence boxes. Miraculously, a floral diary surfaced, overlooked among magazine cuttings. Pages ended 6 weeks before murders, but final entry rattled investigators. Dad spends nights in shed. He took Mom's tablets to keep safe. I heard crack noises like sparks. Corroboration of premeditative electrical testing months before the crime. Pressure to resolve the case reached Parliament. In 2020, a motion passed earmarking $2 million for legacy homicide rewards. Crawford's bounty doubled to $200,000. Advertisements translated into Bahasa Indonesia and Tagalog targeted FIFO worker communities. Shortly after, an aged Australian missionary in Samar, Philippines, emailed police. His late neighbor, a taciturn Irish electrician named Uncle Ned, confessed on deathbed 2010 to sins with copper wire in Australia. Passport photo attached aligned eerily with aged composite.
Unfortunately, local cemetery flooding had washed graves away, no remains to sample. Yet Ned's belongings, rusted lineman pliers engraved EKC, were mailed to Melbourne. Metal tool, worn but legible. Proof Crawford lived at least into the new millennium. The pliers rebooted media frenzy. Podcasts dissected timeline, Redditors geolocated missionary's former barrio, querying if Crawford started a second family under new identity. Inquiry found no marriage records, but 3 children bore Craw as middle name, mother unknown. DNA requests filed, family hesitant. By 2023, genealogical database hits spiked. A 23andMe upload from a California woman showed moderate relation to Crawford line. Her father, adopted in 1975 Manila, listed birth father unknown Irish seaman. Investigators requested consent. She agreed. Autosomal comparison placed her as likely granddaughter of Elmer's first cousin. Close, but not proof. Undeterred, detectives deployed the newest tool, artificial intelligence age regression search, training again on Crawford's youthful photos and generating thousands of intermediate faces from 40 to 90. They fed outputs into passport control CCTV from airports worldwide, focusing on years 1998 to 2005 when facial recognition logs began. A statistically significant cluster popped at Kuala Lumpur International. A passenger, Edward Kelly, traveled twice yearly to Darwin, 2000-2004. Age progressed face score, 0.82 similarity. His arrival cards listed address, CO Mechanics Institute Hostel, Catherine, NT. Police flew north. Hostel long demolished. Seeking Medicare records, they found a Northern Territory health card for Edward Kelly, expired 2005. Treatments for chronic skin cancer, plausible for sun-blasted electrician. Medical files stored a chest x-ray. Radiologists compared old VRC employment x-ray of Crawford, filed 1964 for asbestos screening, to Edward Kelly's 2003 film. Identical spinal curvature, rib count anomaly, and healed left clavicle fracture documented in Crawford's youth. Probability of random match, less than 1 in 50,000. Investigators exulted. Quasi-confirmation, Crawford lived under alias until at least 2005. But Kelly's trail vanished again. Hospital discharge summary noted he relocated to family in Broome. In Broome, a crematorium log showed Edward Kelly, aged 75, cremated 17 May 2007, cause metastatic melanoma. No fingerprints taken, next of kin line blank. Ashes unclaimed, scattered over Cable Beach. Detectives retrieved retort filter sweeps. Microscopic bone fragments survive. Advanced ultra-low copy DNA extraction attempted. In 2024, results dripped. Partial YSTR haplotype matched Crawford male lineage at 97% confidence. Not courtroom airtight, but combined with radiology and Plier artifact, consensus formed. Elmer Crawford likely died 2007, a sun-battered recluse who evaded justice for 37 years. Victoria Police prepared a closure brief for coroner, yet ethics demanded public consultation. Families of Teresa's relatives argued absence of nuclear DNA left sliver of doubt. Law insisted balance of probabilities could close file. Media debated, should the man become a historical footnote or haunt unsolved lists forever? The coroner's inquest was scheduled for 14 March 2025 in Melbourne's ornate Court 5, a chamber unused to cases older than its own timber paneling. Reporters queued with tablets, ready to broadcast whether Victoria would finally certify that Elmer Kyle Crawford, electrician, husband, father, and alleged murderer, was dead. Some expected gavel-pounded closure, others anticipated a legal shrug. Either verdict would echo beyond that courtroom, shaping how Australia labels monsters who outlive pursuit. Presiding state coroner Dr. Lynette Farrow opened by acknowledging the 4 victims, Therese, Catherine, James, and Karen. Their framed photographs, teenage grin, freckled cheek, missing front tooth, faced the gallery like silent witnesses. Ron Iddles, white-haired now, occupied the front row. Next to him sat Margaret O'Donnell, Teresa's surviving sister, the reluctant torchbearer of family memory. She clutched rosary beads, knuckles pale. Across the aisle stood a slimmer crowd, civil liberties observers wary of declaring a man dead on circumstantial science, genealogists eager for precedent, and a pair of university students filming for a true crime vlog. Crown Counsel began. Years of investigation, 23 volumes of evidence, and 3 converging forensic pillars pointed to Crawford's demise in Broome, May 2007. Pillar 1. Radiological concordance between 1964 Flemington chest plate and 2003 Catherine medical film. Unique spinal curvature, rib anomaly, healed clavicle fracture documented in Crawford's youth. Pillar 2. The EKC engraved pliers left with missionary Ned, Uncle Ned in Samar, Philippines, matching Crawford employment kit stamp font. Pillar 3. Ultra-low copy YSTR extraction from cremation filter sweep aligning with Crawford male haplogroup. Cumulatively, counsel argued, balance of probabilities exceeds statutory threshold. They sought a formal finding. Crawford perpetrated the murders and later died under alias Edward Kelly. Defense counsel, appointed to protect interests of an absent, possibly living subject, countered. Radiology overlap could be coincidence. Pliers chain of custody tenuous. YSTR not unique proof.
They warned of institutional hunger for closure.
What if Crawford still breathed in some Balinese boarding house, 85 yet capable of hearing this verdict annul his pursuit? Would justice then surrender? Detective Shaw testified first. She outlined the Broome crematorium timeline, describing the retrieval of vitrified bone dust sieved from flue stocks. Jury-style inquests aren't common in Victoria, but Farrow allowed diagrams, electron microscope imagery of osteon patterns compared against Crawford cousin samples. Shaw's voice never cracked until she displayed photos of the children. "We owe them explicit truth," she said, "even if statistical." Her words stirred murmurs. Margaret O'Donnell wiped a tear. Next came Dr. Malik Ramesh, forensic radiologist. He projected translucent overlays, Crawford 1964 ribs superimposed on 2003 X-ray. Identical left sixth rib bidirectional fracture callus. Identical minor scoliosis at T8. Ramesh concluded probability of two unrelated people sharing all markers was less than 0.006. Defense questioned film sourcing. Ramesh conceded originals lost in Catherine flood, but he digitized from remaining microfilm under chain of evidence. The coroner scribbled notes, skepticism measured. Afternoon session welcomed the ethicist Dr. Priya D'Souza, who parsed social cost. Families crave finality, yet misidentification scars history. See Azaria Chamberlain. She urged temperate humility, suggesting an interim finding. Crawford believed deceased. That halfway step displeased the other side, but satisfied none. Public gallery buzzed at recess. Outside on Lonsdale Street, protesters waved placards. "Name the killer, lay them to rest." Another read, "Circumstance isn't closure." News anchors relayed tension nationwide. Day 2 pivoted to motive. Not strictly necessary, culpability was accepted, but Farrow allowed to contextualize gravity. Crown replayed Catherine's diary excerpt, and forensic economist Sophie Tan unveiled Crawford's clandestine scrap copper revenue charts. Over 5 years, he salted away the equivalent of $50,000. Yet bank ledgers showed near zero withdrawals. Money likely cashed physically. Where? No stash ever found. Some speculated he funded flight. Others imagined bills buried under desert sand. The missing currency symbolized unresolved strands. Even in death, Crawford withheld answers. Margaret O'Donnell took the stand last. At 78, her voice trembled yet projected. She recounted Teresa's final phone call, worry over Elmer's wires and batteries, plan to revise the will, dread but resolve. "My sister suspected danger," Margaret said, gaze locking on reporters, yet she couldn't conceive its scope. Defense objected, hearsay, but Farrow allowed, citing victim impact rights. Quiet fell. Even skeptics sensed generational grief amplified by decades of maybe. Closing submissions crystallized debate. Crown. Overwhelming mosaic proves Crawford's death. To deny closure is to let specter fester. Defense. A mosaic still contains gaps. Law must guard against comfort disguised as certainty. Farrell retired to chambers. Hours later, she returned with findings. The courtroom hushed. "On balance of probabilities," she read, "I find Elmer Kyle Crawford unlawfully caused the deaths of his wife Therese and their children Catherine, James, and Karen at Glenroy on or about 30 June 1970. That he subsequently transported their bodies to Loch Ard Gorge, staging a vehicular incident, and that the individual later living under the identity Edward Kelly, who died 17 May 2007 in Broome, was one and the same person." Gasps, then silence. Farrow continued. "Accordingly, the outstanding warrant is discharged. Let the record show the pursuit's end, though the sorrow endures." Reporters dashed to file copy. End of 55-year manhunt. Outside, Margaret O'Donnell spoke to microphones. "Justice delayed isn't justice denied," she stated. "We bury them again today, this time with the truth." She thanked detectives, then quietly condemned the mythologizing. Elmer was no mastermind, just a coward who ran until cancer caught him. Reactions split. True crime blogs lamented loss of mystery. Legal pundits praised evidentiary evolution. Civil liberty forums questioned precedent. Could similar circumstantial nets ensnare innocence? The coroner's office released a detailed 88-page report, footnoting every scientific citation, template for future cases lacking live perpetrators.
Victoria Police staged a modest memorial at Loch Ard Gorge. Officers, family representatives, and schoolchildren placed wreaths atop the cliff. Detective Iddles, voice graveled, read Catherine's diary line about sparks in the shed, then closed his notebook forever. Cold Case Squad archivists boxed Crawford files for state library preservation. Yet conversation persisted. Should Australia criminalize flight from homicide beyond statute by defaulting to presumed guilt, as Quebec debated? Legislators cited Crawford as cautionary impetus for National Missing Alias Database, linking health, taxation, and funeral registries, preventing fugitives from dying incognito again. Meanwhile, genealogical detectives turned towards open loops. The children in Salmar bearing Crawford middle names. The cousin's postcard back on the green. Closure in law did not extinguish curiosity.
Scholars planned a documentary exploring how immigrant isolation and financial anxiety can incubate familicide, a social autopsy hoping to forecast other Elmers before they strike. For Margaret and remaining relatives, though, the epilogue arrived. Ashes of Edward Kelly, collected at last, were interred in an unmarked plot far from family graves. Cemetery staff noted a single attendee, Margaret herself, placing a wilted thistle and whispering, "May God judge you now." Half a century after the murders, Elmer Crawford's shadow lingers in Australia's cultural memory like the phantom surge of an ungrounded wire. Crime writing courses at Monash dissect his blueprint. Sociology lectures cite the case when defining familicide typologies. Even Year 11 legal studies textbooks devote a sidebar, Crawford and the Evolution of Cold Case Forensics. Yet public fascination isn't driven solely by forensic milestones or grisly intrigue. It's the nagging dread that a mild-mannered neighbor, armed with know-how and motive, might orchestrate horror and possibly sidestep accountability. True crime publishers seized on the coroner's 2025 finding as the perfect epilogue. Within months, 3 competing biographies hit shelves, each framing Crawford differently. The calculating miser, the psychologically fractured immigrant, the symbol of 70s suburban sexism. Media critics argued over narrative ethics. Should child murders ever be packaged as page-turning suspense? Sales charts answered affirmatively. Netflix commissioned a limited series, promising fidelity to facts, but early leaks hinted at fictional subplots, a secret second family in Indonesia, a covert ACO sting. Detectives who spent decades on the file bristled at dramatization. Still, they consented to technical consulting, hoping the show might spawn fresh familial DNA uploads. In Glenroy, number 14 Cardinal Road sat vacant for years, rumored cursed. Eventually, a developer raised it, erecting 2 townhouses whose sleek facades hide no trace of the slaughter once sealed by floral curtains. Local council debated installing a plaque. Residents vetoed. Let ghosts lie, one said at a community forum. Yet every June, someone leaves 4 white roses at the curb, anonymous penance. At Loch Ard Gorge, Parks Victoria added a discreet interpretive sign near the cliff railing. Site of the Crawford family tragedy, 1970. Domestic violence steals futures. If you need help, call 1-800-RESPECT. Tourists snap photos, some unaware of context until reading. Others arrive purposefully, guided by podcast maps. Rangers note that visitors linger longer now, eyes tracing the shoreline where Holden wreckage once rested. Tragedy absorbs into landscape, the ocean's roar a reminder of secrets washed yet indelible. Meanwhile, investigative science continues to order the case. In 2026, the Australasian Institute of Forensic Genomics publishes a peer-reviewed paper on the ultra-low-copy YSTR method refined for Crawford's cremation residue, tech now employed to identify bushfire victims, disaster fragments, even microevidence on improvised bombs. A senior author credits the Crawford family line for motivating breakthroughs. Sometimes, she tells ABC Radio, justice for one ripples into safeguards for many. Police training manuals incorporate the Crawford timeline in modules on financial control red flags. Recruits learn to spot patterns, sudden cash withdrawals, secret bank accounts, unexplained DIY electrical projects. The statewide Family Violence Task Force reports a modest uptick in early interventions, traced to tips from tradies who noticed stockpiled wires in a neighbor's shed, citizens attuned by decades of Crawford lore. Teray's sister, Margaret O'Donnell, spends her twilight years advocating for expanded coroner powers. She addresses state parliament, arguing that unresolved suspect deaths should trigger automatic genealogical DNA sweeps to locate potential unknown victims. My family wasn't just stolen, she testifies. They were hidden.
Every extra step of silence lets the killer win again. The bill, informally dubbed Teresa's Law, passes the upper house, mandating genetic review before any unidentified remains are cremated. Another legal legacy forged from sorrow. Academic conferences probe the cultural psychology of Crawford mythology. One paper posits Australians cling to the story because it disputes the fair-go optimism of post-war suburbia, exposing darker currents beneath fibro walls. Another points to colonial undertones. Crawford, an immigrant shaping new identity on stolen land, then stealing lives to protect that identity. Discussions rarely yield consensus, yet they ensure the narrative remains a living case study rather than a yellowing article. Technology presses on. In 2027, Swiss scientists unveil quantum-resilient identity tokens inspired partly by Crawford's electrocution ingenuity, proof that criminal creativity often seeds innovation. At the product launch, a slide credits historical cases that challenged security paradigms, listing Loch Ard Gorge alongside the Great Train Robbery and the Antwerp Diamond Heist. Social media backlash accuses the company of glamorizing tragedy. Executives revise the deck, but screenshots circulate, fueling debate on ethics of commodifying crime. Technology presses on. In 2027, Swiss scientists unveil quantum-resilient identity tokens, inspired partly by Crawford's electrocution ingenuity, proof that criminal creativity often seeds innovation. At the product launch, a slide credits historical cases that challenged security paradigms, listing Loch Ard Gorge alongside the Great Train Robbery and the Antwerp Diamond Heist. Social media backlash accuses the company of glamorizing tragedy. Executives revise the deck, but screenshots circulate, fueling debate on ethics of commodifying crime. Tra.leaks. In 2027, Swiss scientists unveil quantum-resilient identity tokens, inspired partly by Crawford's electrocution ingenuity, proof that criminal creativity often seeds innovation. At the product launch, a slide credits historical cases that challenged security paradigms, listing Loch Ard Gorge alongside the Great Train Robbery and the Antwerp Diamond Heist. Social media backlash accuses the company of glamorizing tragedy. Executives revise the deck, but screenshots circulate, fueling debate on ethics of commodifying crime.
Podcasters mark the case's 60th anniversary in 2030 with a global live stream from both Glenroy and Broome. Viewers donate to domestic violence charities in real time, $2.3 million raised within hours. A symbolic link is forged. Technology that enabled anonymity in Crawford's era now galvanizes support networks he never imagined. During the stream, Detective Shaw, now Deputy Commissioner, announces the division's latest cold case solve using Crawford-pioneered DNA methods. The crowd erupts in digital applause, a cathartic closure on a circle of innovation born from horror. At State Archives, historians open Crawford's sealed psychiatric profile from the 1950s immigration intake. It reports emotionally reserved, difficulty trusting authority. Scholars debate whether early intervention might have altered his trajectory. Social workers harness findings to lobby for migrant support funding, arguing assimilation stress plus untreated anxiety can manifest in catastrophic violence if coupled with financial strain. Their evidence, a family of 4 lost to the silence of an electrician's workshop. Margaret O'Donnell passes away peacefully in 2032, age 85. Her will funds scholarship at Monash for research into family annihilator prevention. The inaugural lecture notes her unwavering campaign ensured her sister and nieces remained more than case numbers. The scholarship medal features an embossed lily, the flower left each June at Cardinal Road, encircled by the motto, Lux in Tenebris, light in darkness. And what of Crawford himself? Ashes scattered, aliases recorded, verdict final? Society still wrestles with the moral calculus. Does attributing a date of death grant him a dignified endpoint he never afforded his family? The coroner's report cannot answer, nor can science, courts, or media. Yet acknowledging his mortal conclusion allows space for remembering the victims as more than backstory to a fugitive saga. Catherine's artwork, James's homemade billy cart, Karen's diary entry about learning to whistle, these resurfaced during estate processing and now reside in a museum exhibit titled Interrupted Childhoods. School groups tour it, teachers framing lessons around resilience and recognizing early signs of domestic control. As our 6-part exploration closes, the Crawford case stands as a testament to persistence, in inquiry, in technology, and in communal memory.
It warns that evil can wear an ordinary face and wield household tools. But it also proves that society's tools evolve. Copper clips answered by electron microscopes, forged aliases by genealogical databases, silence by podcasts and policy reforms. Each tick of investigative progress counters a talk of criminal ingenuity. The balance is never final, but vigilance tips the scales. If this journey through the twisted tale of Elmer Crawford gripped you, please like this video and subscribe for more meticulously researched true crime series. Your engagement fuels future investigations and keeps these essential stories in the public eye. Thank you for watching, stay curious, stay safe, and remember that even the coldest cases can warm to the light of collective resolve.